Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where if you're a Star Wars fan, or a Last Jedi fan in particular, you might want to sit down for this one, because we're going to address some hard box office truths, the hardest truths to dismiss. And it's times like this that we thank goodness for the box office. Thank the Hollywood gods, because it's only the box office that can light the way as to what should be done next in a situation that has become very clouded with a divided fan base, a holiday calendar that's throwing off comparisons, and big box office numbers. Big, sexy, distracting numbers. I mean, let's not forget that it was largely big box office numbers for Batman v Superman that kept Warner Brothers from taking decisive action that maybe could have saved Justice League. In fact, I'm sure right now some of you are typing down below, how can the second biggest opening weekend of all time and what's sure to be a billion-dollar picture be bad? Well, that's because it's important to realize as Hollywood becomes franchise heavy and big numbers become the norm, that there is a difference between big box office numbers and strong box office numbers. Now, back to this holiday calendar situation, which has taken off some of the edge of that 69% second weekend drop headline, which should be a red flag, but is being interpreted as a yellow flag, which is understandable because everyone knows that there's a lull in moviegoing right before Christmas, right? And this year, that window just happened to be The Last Jedi's second weekend. But now that the Christmas Day number itself is in, and if we force ourselves to look at the daily numbers instead of just weekend to weekend, we can see that there is indeed a problem. The daily numbers aren't pretty. I can see why nobody wants to look at them, but here they are. And as you can see, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi were pretty much on par their opening weekends, which proves that audience interest was very strong at the beginning. So The Force Awakens, I think, in large part, did its job, right? And Rogue One didn't erode the brand. So they were in a good position when they first opened. But as you might recall, bad word of mouth kicked in almost immediately. It's as if some people were just waiting for the opportunity. I told you in my backlash breakdown that there is, I think, something of a revenge factor, for what happened to the DCEU, especially towards Disney. And while Marvel proved to be too protected by its fan base, and I think to some degree, the movies that were being put out there, Star Wars ended up being quite vulnerable, and so a certain contingent was ready to pounce. Also, it's a comparison that's ready and waiting, right? This isn't something we have to figure out what's happening here. We know, we've seen it before, we've seen it just very recently, and people were ready with that comparison. So that took hold almost immediately, like Friday afternoon, I think I recall, is when I started to see the Batman v Superman comparisons coming out. And as you can see, after its initial weekend, The Last Jedi just could not rebound. In fact, 11 days out, it's already trailing The Force Awakens by about 200 million. That's so bad! Now, of course, as many are saying, The Force Awakens was a unique event, right? Which promised a return to form for Star Wars after the much maligned prequels. Although you already see some people starting to say, the prequels were better than this at least, right? It's a very bad negative narrative that's taking shape. But of course, people have said it would be almost impossible to recapture that lightning in a bottle that was The Force Awakens. And that's true. But what we're looking at now is pretty much going to be a 50% decline from episode to episode. That is horrible. It's not only worrisome for episode 9, and the brand could be even further eroded by Han Solo, which comes out first, but this could mean diminished returns in the ancillary market, merchandise, and interest in the 2 Star Wars lands that Disney is building on both coasts, set to open in 2019. Don't forget that these movies are just the engine of a train that has a heck of a lot of cars attached to it, right? And in some ways, those cars are actually more valuable, money-wise, than the engine, right? The engine's just getting the whole thing started. Now, another problem is that thanks to the surprise strength of Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, the other studios will likely smell that box office blood in the water. Yes, Sony was able to successfully counter-program Star Wars. Just think about that. Let that linger for a moment in your mind, right? Sony's Jumanji came in almost 20 million higher than expected for its first six days. It was supposed to come in somewhere with a 5 in front of it. Then as the weekend got started in earnest for the holiday, people thought maybe a 6. It ended up with a 7 in front of it. Oh my goodness. And in fact, Sony is planning to do the same thing again in 2019 opposite Episode 9 with a new Masters of the Universe movie, while Universal plans to open their Wicked movie, both which no longer seem like kamikaze release dates. And we all shudder to think what Deadpool 2 is going to do to Han Solo at the box office this summer. It will likely be horrific. And with the new negative DCEU-like turn that Star Wars coverage has taken, amusing to many. Oh, that's so bad. I can't believe Disney allowed this to happen. We're going to discuss this, but in a separate video. Again, right now we're just focusing on the box office situation, which is bleak and proves that there is a problem. Now, as for Universal, they didn't have so merry a Christmas this year, as another female-friendly musical, Pitch Perfect 3, well, we'll see how Wicked does. This Wicked, this release date, by the way, comes out just a couple of weeks after Frozen 2, which is very much modeled after Wicked in many ways, down to Idina Menzel. So that might have taken all the air out of Wicked already. But it's got to be able to do better than Pitch Perfect 3, which opened at a mere fraction of the previous entry in that franchise. We all thought it was stupid, by the way, not to include any Christmas covers in a Christmas release. But I was thinking about it, and I think Elizabeth Banks and company were likely worried that would shorten the film's post-Christmas playability. But now it has no playability. I think it was also a problem that The Greatest Showman divided up the musical theater crowd and offered further proof that when Hugh Jackman isn't Wolverine, audiences aren't interested. Hugh, baby! When Feige calls, and we all know that he will if this Fox Disney deal is approved, for your sake as much as ours, pick up the damn phone. All right, now as for the weekend's other new releases, yes, this holiday frame was just too damn crowded. Downsizing and Father Figures both failed to register. But to be fair, Paramount didn't even really try with either of their Matt Damon picks in this last quarter. They're just basically clearing out the old movies that were from the previous administration over there. And they're planning, Jim Giannopoulos is planning his own slate and his own regime. And then also, while the Hollywood Foreign Press Association was fascinated by Ridley Scott's switcheroo, last-minute switcheroo, audiences proved not to be interested at all. And they weren't interested in Jessica Chastain's latest either. In fact, audiences continue to never be interested in Jessica Chastain. The writing is on the wall, Hollywood. Audiences, she's box office poison. And I'm sad to say it seems to be the same for Idris Elba. So sad for Idris Elba. He's just not connecting. Surprisingly, though, something else that didn't connect was Phantom Thread, which delivered a very low per-theater average for a Paul Thomas Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis flick, although there's been almost no advertising for the movie. Did you remember that it opened? And it only opened, of course, in a couple of theaters, but even there, I don't think that they pushed it as hard as they could. But The Post, though, had a very healthy per-theater average. It made all the more impressive since it debuted in 9 theaters instead of the usual 4 and still got close to $100,000 again, per theater average. But as expected, both coasts couldn't resist a Spielberg, Streep Hanks, and anti-Trump flick. Now, as for this coming weekend, Only Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool will hit a handful of theaters as 2017 wraps up, and Hollywood hopes you'll see what's already playing, with no other options to distract you. Even I don't believe Netflix or Amazon has anything that they're releasing at the last minute either. So I'm wondering, are you planning to head out to the movies for the rest of the holiday break? And if so, what will you be seeing? Be sure to share it down below. And of course, don't forget to vote in Beyond the Trailer's annual poll for what you think are the best and worst movies of 2017. The link is down below in the video description, and you have until the end of the day, January 1st, to cast your vote. And that's this week's Movie Math. As always, thanks for going over the weekend box office with me. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about Star Wars now that you can see the numbers on the wall. Take emotion out of it, both if you're rooting for The Last Jedi to do well, or if you're hoping that it fails. Either way, step back, calm yourself, and just look at what the numbers are saying. And then share your thoughts down below. And as always, you can check out some other videos right now.